Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone. And now, here is your host, the lovely, delightful, insightful, and all-around great gal, Ms. Barbara DeLong.
And welcome to Nightlight, everybody. Tonight we have again a treat because Michele Avanti is with us. And just to remind you a little bit about Michele, she's a published certified planetary systems analyst, consulting metaphysician, and ordained minister. And since 1972, she's taught and consulted in many areas of metaphysics. She's lectured and given more than 15,000 live consultations on radio, television, and at seminars and workshops across America, and her columns have appeared in newspapers and magazines since 1985. Hello, Michele. How are you doing tonight?
Just great. It's quite a time frame. We have that full moon in Taurus, and the moon has now moved into Gemini, but that full moon in Taurus gives us a 2-week time slot where it's time for us to let go of the things we've been really stubborn about.
Well, you know, ever since we had that huge eclipse that went across the country, I remember you talking about it and how it was sort of a foreshadowing of a period of time when there was going to be I don't want to say chaos, but that's the word that comes to mind, and tribulation. And my heavens, I mean, this country has been, it feels like every time you turn around, there's something else that is a tragedy of some sort that is happening. And I can't, every time something happens, every time I see, you know, so many are killed and so many are this, and I think back to your talking about that eclipse, and I keep thinking nobody could have possibly foretold it was going to be like this. I mean, you did say it was going to be unsettling and upsetting. And when somebody says something like that, you think of emotional stuff on a personal level. You don't really think of it as the kind of national confusion that we have had ever since the eclipse.
Yeah, well, that's you know, when I say these things, I always pray to God that I'm wrong and that our states of consciousness have changed so much that maybe all the wisdom of the ancients is changed. You know, I'm always wishing for that, but I, in my lifetime, have seen that what they have said manifests. So I put it out there, and I also go on the metaphysics that, you know, if you speak about it enough, it deflates the energy. So I do all of these things hoping and praying that the things that I might say that are super challenging to us as a people and even individually to my clients, that we can manifest something different. But
super challenging is one thing, but what we've been experiencing is a whole nother thing. I mean, it's
Yeah, well,
It
that's what
feels
they
like the
say.
very fabric of the foundation is crumbling to a certain degree.
Well, you look at the combination of things. It's always fascinates me how the universe is so spot on. How there can be people who say there's no true logic to it. How can you say that? But it is spot on, and the logic is there. Here we are on the threshold of the 26,000 year mark, a doorway into a leap of consciousness, an expanded and accelerated time frame for all things to change and move into a higher state. At the same time, as a nation, here we are in our chart,
Michelle,
working towards a.
Michelle, you keep going in and out here.
I don't know why. I don't know
Are you
why that
plugged
would
all
be.
the way in?
I just checked the plug to make sure it really is plugged all the way in, and it is. I don't know what to do about that. Yeah, all my plugs are plugged.
You know what? Just because we can do it, why don't you
Now you're going in and out.
Okay. Deb, could you maybe disconnect Michelle and then bring her back in and see if we can get a better connection?
Sure can.
Of course, Deb was going in and out. Maybe not. Am I back, Deb?
I can hear you.
Okay, let's get Michelle back.
That's what I'm working on.
Okay. There you are. Michelle?
Yes.
And you sound really, really good. So.
Oh, good. Well, those little glips happen somewhere in space. At any rate, when we look at the national chart, we are at a time. This is that period in time where many nations disintegrate and come to an end because they experience their Pluto return, and we are on the verge of that. We were born as a nation with Pluto at 27 degrees of Capricorn, and Pluto is in Capricorn now. It's about 17 degrees right now, and it's a slow mover, but by 2020 we will have Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn along with Jupiter in Capricorn. So the statement of transformation is all over the place, and when you take Saturn and add it to Pluto, you get a crumbling of government or completely a new doorway to reconstruct. So where are we in time? We're just coming on 2018. So 2017, you add 5 years to that. That takes us to 2022, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's that eclipse, as I mentioned. According to the ancients, an eclipse total solar eclipse will have a reference based on the amount of time it is visible in a nation. That eclipse was visible for 5 hours and 23 minutes, I believe. And for every hour, you will have a year. So 5 2/3 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, there had been there has been a great deal of time of apathy as far as government go. And I don't want it all to crumble at the same time, but I think that a reworking of the entire system, would not be a bad idea. And so I just don't want everything to fall apart. If they do it a little at a time, it just might work out to our greater benefit. And it's just those people who try to hold on to the old ways often weight us down from going forward.
Yes, and that's interesting that you come back to that. That's the Taurus element we're in right now. This is your time to let go of the things you've been hanging on to the longest. Let go of the attachments that you have that you are so stubborn about. Mm-hmm. But right now we have a benefit. We have Jupiter in Scorpio as of October the 11th. It went into Scorpio, and it will be there for a year. And our sun, when this country was born, is at 13 degrees of Cancer. So Jupiter will trine the sun. Jupiter is trying to expose what has been hidden in the context of power. The things that have been behind the seat of power are to be exposed. All the things that are corrupt will be exposed. All the issues of, I want to say, sexual controls will be exposed. Issues of tax controls will be exposed. Probably banking will also be exposed. All of those things are going to come to light during this year, especially once Saturn goes into Capricorn.
Okay, so you're talking 2018?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because, I am working on my overview for next year, and while it feels, if you can look at it one of two ways. You can look at it as devastating, or you can look at it as very positive. And I think that how we handle the changes that are coming ahead will determine greatly the direction and the element of security that we have within our life. Change is good.
It is. It's just scary, that's all, because when you open the door, you don't know what's going to be on the other side. You've known what's inside the door all this time, and even if it's shabby and worn out, at least you know what it is.
Yes. I have some shoes like that.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. Well, my dear friend, she's gone now, was a wonderful astrologer, Joan Negus, for anybody who might know her name. She was out of New Jersey. And what she used to say about Pluto, is the planet that just turns everything upside down. Transformation is what Pluto does, and it literally throws everything out with the baby with the bathwater, so then you have to go out and find it. And what she would say is, when Pluto gets in your path, go dig a hole, go plant some flowers, go do the things that Pluto likes. Pluto likes to get in the dirt, so go dig.
Yeah, well, it's, and I think that while we see this with our government and our society as a whole, because it's hitting society, it's hitting the movie industry, it's hitting all aspects of our lives. And it's I know I look at my life and everything is shifting around in it, and it's very exciting because you get sometimes you get into a groove that becomes a rut, and it takes something like this to break you out of that pattern and to allow you to create a new groove. And it's very exciting. It's sort of like the old stuff just doesn't fit anymore. So, and I'm not talking clothes. So I buy elastic waists. I'm safe. But when it comes to professional stuff and practicing, and it's really funny because I never would have thought I'm going to start doing videos. I'm going to be still doing the radio shows, of course, but I'm going to also be doing video shows as well. And you're going to be a part of that. And I'm very excited about it. I have to learn the program a little bit better before I make any forays into the realms of this whole thing. But the YouTube channel is picking up people, and new people are subscribing, and it's a very exciting thing for me. It's something I never thought I would ever do before, and yet kaboom, here it is. Suddenly, here's my drive, and it was kind of like, but I was so comfortable the way things were.
Well, it calls for expansion. Jupiter moves on, and we have to. It's activating something in your chart. I don't have your chart in front of me, so I can't go peek at it, unfortunately. That's okay. But it's activating something that's going to expand your world. And I know in my own chart, I have Jupiter very close to the midheaven in Pisces. So now that Jupiter is in Scorpio, it makes a trine to that, and that's going to open doorways for me to do more, perhaps, like you said, more things that might include video, more ways to connect with the world. And so I may now look for a publisher for a couple of books, manuscripts that I have right now. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
And it's funny because I talk to so many people who are so nervous because what they thought they thought they had things set, that at this time in my life I wanted to have stability. Well, you do have stability, but you have flexibility with that stability, and that's what I think people don't understand. It doesn't mean you trash everything. It means you keep the good, and you expand upon. You keep the good and let go of the bad and expand upon the good, so that it's a time of growth. It's a very exciting time. And yes, it means you're going to be forced to roll your sleeves up and expand your horizons, which is a great thing.
Yeah. Well, stability too can be something we all dream of. That's why every child hears the story ending in happily ever after. Unfortunately, stability is not a reality. There is no such thing as stability. There is only the present moment. We think, oh yeah, I have this house now and I have the right income and everything is going in the right way, but you don't know what's going to happen down the road. People didn't know in the 1930s what was going to happen, and banks closed. People didn't have access to money. Look at people in Puerto Rico. They had many of those people had fine lives, and all of a sudden Hurricane Maria shows up, and they don't have any power. They don't have any water. And the United States government has provided a very limited amount of supplies, where we as a nation should have taken care of all of those people. They're still without power. So we can think it's all stable, but we really don't know. And to stay in that zone where we say it is and it's going to always be, that's really a false place to live. You have to live in the present moment and train yourself to feel what the flow is doing and follow it. Your heart's telling you what to do. Go with it.
Yeah, and I think so many people actually have that feeling of a desire to grow and to shift and to change. But there's that, if I change things, it might not be for the better. But if you say to yourself, I'm going to keep everything just the way it is, it means that you're not growing. And
you can't do it anyway.
No,
you'll get away with it for a little while, but eventually Pluto will show up. And everything that you've been hanging on to gets tossed.
Yeah, but Pluto has that 2x4 that hits you in the face. I think it's the only planet that comes with a bat. And if you aren't moving along, if you aren't courageous enough to make subtle changes, and if you make the subtle changes as you go, they don't become massive changes at one time.
No. The ancients said Pluto had a scythe. Pluto is the reaper, and where Uranus gives you a little electric shock. And so these different planets have their own little toys that they play with.
They all have a weapon. It's almost like a video game, isn't it?
Well, it is. Life, I've said this many times to my students, video games replicate life, and all of these things replicate soul's journey. That's why we get intrigued by video games. And what do video games teach us? They teach us all kinds of things. As much as many parents say, I wish my children wouldn't continue to play them. They really do. They teach you, you get like 5 lives in almost every video game. Mm-hmm. You reincarnate, don't you?
Yes, you do. And the other thing, they've done an amazing study. They worked with, I think, 2 nursing homes, or 3 or 4, I forget. They worked with a bunch of nursing homes. And in one group, they exposed the patrons to video games of their choice. And the other group, not so. They could continue whatever it was they were doing, whether it was reading or playing canasta or whatever. But those that did the video games had greater mental acuity than those who were just kind of sliding through. Mm-hmm. And I'm not telling everybody over 60 to take up video games, though I play a couple myself. But I think it's a matter of keeping your mind sharp.
That is, and that is the good thing. I mean, video games move at a very quick pace, mm-hmm. and so your mind has to move with them. Whereas if everybody in the group is playing canasta, they're all playing at the same pace they've always played.
Yeah.
And somebody go get the tea and cookies and we'll hang out.
Yeah. And you know, it's so, I speak to everybody who's over 50 when I say that the more you challenge your brain, the longer you're going to live most probably, and the more excitement you'll have in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just I speak from experience because I'm 73 and I've never had more going on in my life, and it's because I continue to challenge myself, and I feel my granddaughter, I recently visited my grandchildren, and I was asking them about their hobbies and what was their favorite this and what was their favorite that, and my granddaughter said to me, "Grandma, what is your favorite hobby?" And while I have lots of things that interest me and that I'm involved in, I finally had to say, you know, my greatest hobby, my greatest joy is learning.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
And so the stars are definitely setting us up for a roller coaster ride, it appears.
Well, I think, you know, we probably always have one. It's just that right now the combination of things is it's one of those big coasters. You know, it's one of the ones that tips you upside down for a few seconds. Then you find yourself back up on top. It's pretty scary. It's yeah, exactly. Some people do throw up. Some people don't. It's mind-blowing. I don't do those coasters, so you won't find me on them. But nonetheless, yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. So, you know, there's what I've always told anyone when you have Pluto active in a chart is go with it, don't fight it. Go with it. If there's a transformation happening, work with that transformation. Don't hide from it and say, oh, it's not really happening. It is happening. And if it is happening, you need to see what works best for you. You know, if you see the banks are changing their outlook in your area, you need to say, okay, where is my money safest? Do I need to diversify? How much money should I keep at home? Things like that, you need to really ask yourself questions, and what your heart tells you, do it. You know, don't do it out of fear. Do it out of trying to stay a step ahead of what may be happening. And, you know, it doesn't hurt you to go and take action. It will hurt you if the action is taken on you. So,
well, with the knowledge that yes, we are going through times of incredible change, and socially, as a country, as a culture, we're going through times of change with all of these. I don't want to even call them terrorists. It feels like they are guerrilla warfare. There's guerrilla warfare going on in our country, and I think that there are different things fueling a lot of these different attacks. Some of it is terrorism. Well, it's all terrorism of one sort or another, but knowing that is happening, and frankly, for the next 5 years, I don't see a lot of change.
Yeah, but I think you will. You are going to see a lot of change. Will you see change in people's ideologies in terms of terrorism? I don't think there you're going to see the change. But how we handle it, how we look at it will change. The way that, you know, if you go to a simple experience where someone is attacking you for one reason or another, if you attack back, it just gives them more power to attack you further.
Yeah.
Eventually you learn that pouring love, changing the way you look at the person, changing the way you work with the person or receive the person, this opens doors to a whole different experience. So we will find a new way to work with those who are creating havoc in our world. You know, we have people in this country who become what they call a lone wolf and get activated by ISIS. What we have to ask ourselves is, How does that happen? Why does it happen? And what can we do to change that pattern so that there is less chance that anyone would want to go in that direction? There has to be some dissatisfaction with life that causes someone to even search for meaning in places that involve something as horrendous as murdering other people. So where and how do we change that? And those are the questions we have to ask and we have to start working on. I think there are people in this country who are working on them. But as a nation, we have to recognize that we have to fund that kind of research. We have to be behind it rather than funding more weapons of war to continue to fight or combat in terms of bombing. We need to look at our world and see what is the new direction we need to take to make the world one of an embrace rather than one of constant conflict.
Oh, I totally agree. And, during the Revolutionary War, the colonists were able to overwhelm the British by utilizing guerrilla warfare. Mm-hmm. And that's what's being used upon us now. It's small groups or people who are not connected to anything or anyone else who take it upon themselves to rebel and act. And, if they can get away, but if they can't, that's okay. They don't really care. And these people have spent, it's been years in conditioning these people, and you're right. I agree that there should be a different environment, and if there's a different environment, then these kinds of people won't be influenced by what's out there. But at the same time, I really feel that there has to be some sort of watchfulness as to the kind of material that is out there on the internet, because there is so much out there that could warp someone's mind, which is frightening.
Well, that's absolutely true. These are the questions of the society that have to do with Pluto transforming it. As a nation, we've grown in a direction that is a technologically a world of wonderment. We have now to come to, again, we hit this platform at different periods over centuries where we have to come to a new level of self-responsibility. Right now, many people in this country get their news from Facebook, and I think that is hysterical and sad, because Facebook is a lovely place to connect with people. I don't disallow that in any way, but unfortunately, many people will just say, oh, well, this came from so-and-so, so it must be true. But did so-and-so do their homework to find out if it was true when it was passed to them? Mm-hmm. I can't say how many times I have written to people in my Facebook group and said, I can't pass this on because I just checked it and it's not true. Mm-hmm. And here, let me show you how to check so that you won't pass anything on to anyone that's not true, because we don't want to do that. There's nobody that I know who wants to send propaganda to other people. That's not who we are. But we end up falling into a cycle that allows us to believe something because it came to us through hands that, again, they were not checking it. So this is where we have to become responsible, and each one who stops and says, you know what, I'm going to check that first. Mm-hmm. Every time we do that, we start taking on self-responsibility, and then we teach others to do the same, and then we expand as a nation and as a people to where propaganda will no longer penetrate us. So that's what we have to do. I mean, I've had people on Facebook say to me, but how could you even know if that's the truth? It's not the truth. How do you know that? And I said, well, if you go to the Federal Register, you'll see if something really has been passed as a law. You will see what actions have actually been taken by the government. It has to be put there. That there is a law that says they must post it. So that's where you go when you go look there. And if it's not there and somebody's telling you it is, then it's not true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just Facebook.
No, of course not.
It's news as well, and checking your facts, checking into things. I can't tell you the number of things that I've heard people say, "Oh my God, look at this, look at this, look at this," and it's like, where did you hear that? Yeah. And it's it's most of the time Facebook, but sometimes it's on the news, and it's a matter of,
well,
come on.
There are news organizations now that are really not news organizations. I was talking to my sister some time ago, and she said to me, she says, "Well, they're not called news anymore." I said, "What are you talking about?" She says, "No, they now are labeled entertainment." I said, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
Because growing up, I'm old like you. When we were growing up, everything, when they said it was news, Walter Cronkite came on, it was news.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't going to deliver something that wasn't the facts.
That's so true. And these were the guys like Hemingway that went to the front lines, and it happily, hopefully, there won't be front lines anymore. But it is frightening, and so many people they react before they question. They react before they think.
That's mob rule.
We're coming.
That's mob rule, and we have to always be vigilant within ourselves and vigilant for our friends. Because if I have a friend who starts to react, it's my job to say, wait, let's take another look at the picture. Let's expand our view of the picture. Let's make sure we have all the absolute facts before we do this. And then if indeed it is what we're thinking it might be, then let me join you in that reaction.
Well, it used to be, and it's not any longer, but it used to be you had to have 3 non-related sources that would confirm something before that you would broadcast it. I'm pretty sure it was 3.
Yes.
And that does not seem to be the case anymore. Yeah. And they were sources that you could name. Not unnamed sources, because anybody could be an unnamed source, but it's changed so, and I do feel that we are coming back to a time where people are starting to say, prove it, show me the facts, let me know what the facts are, and then I'll pay attention to what you're saying. And it is a shift and a change of consciousness that is going on within the totality of humanity, so that we have other people in other countries are coming to a point where they will no longer take being dominated or having a dictator over them, or they're going countries. I know the one thing that last year I predicted was that the borders of countries were going to change, and some countries were going to split they were going to split in half, and it's happening, or it feels like people are trying to change it. And I'm not talking about the U.S. here. I think while certain states have always threatened to secede from the Union, I don't expect them to do so. But I do expect some of the borders of some of the states to change over the next couple of years, which should be interesting. And I do feel that there are a couple of states that will be broken up so that they are separate states.
Well, they've talked about that in California, Oregon for years. They call the area southern Oregon and northern California, they call it the state of Jefferson, and they've called it that for years and years and years and years, because we have more in common. Those two areas have more in common than they do with the lower part of the state of California or the northern part of the state of Oregon. So,
yeah.
They've talked about that forever, of making that a state unto itself. Yeah, the issues of the states is there's so much we have to look at, and that's why we need to start talking and stop allowing the power controls that go on in the Congress to overrule the voice of the people. We have complete representation in states and less representation in other states, where there's more population in the states that have less representation and less population in the states that have more. So it's just, it makes no really good sense. You have to remember, when all of this was started, the amount of population wasn't that much.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the state of California, when that state was formed, it wasn't a whole lot of anything.
Well, it was a territory. It wasn't necessarily meant to be a state. It just, I guess they just invited it in as a block, I guess. I don't know. I wasn't there. But thank God the Louisiana Territory was broken up into states, because that could be a big mess. Yeah. But you're right. When the states came into being, several of them have been, late bloomers and stuff. But we still have some out there that could become a state if they were voted in.
When you look at Puerto Rico, 3.5 million people? That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
no, I think the United States is going to shift. I think that not only are the borders of the states going to shift around, I think there's going to be a changing of the lines of and the borders of some of the different states, and heck, even Texas could be broken up into a couple of states. It's huge.
Oh, I know. And so is, yeah.
You could do North Texas, East Texas, West Texas. You could do it lots of ways so everybody remains a Texan, but, in a different kind of...
I think you'll have a hard time doing that, because, you know what? The shape of the state is really a symbol in that state.
That's true.
I can't see it happening, but who knows what the future holds. When you look at the 2020 transits and progressions for the map of the United States of America, we have a tremendous amount of conversation going on and a reassessment of our language, our laws. There's a whole huge, very stressful time zone there of struggling with communication and getting out to the world who we are. So, we're working on it, and unfortunately we have to go through this terrible period of trying to understand what we've come to. When I hear people say, and I have a brother who says this, it's pretty hysterical to hear it from him. He'll say, but they're going to come and take our guns away. And I say to him, Tony, they can't take our guns away. They would have to change the United States Bill of Rights to do that. And we are not going to have states who will ratify that. It isn't going to happen. You have to stop believing the things you're hearing. We can have sensible laws about guns without being fearful that anyone's going to take your right to own a gun. Anyone who perpetrates that is perpetrating a lie. It is part of our Bill of Rights.
I know, and people get out there and they say they're going to take your guns away. Be careful! They're trying to take your guns away, and they're frightening people. And
sure,
and those people don't take the time to realize what it would take to take their guns away, and that is never going to happen.
No, I try so hard to get people to look at things realistically instead of through fear. To hear what I heard tonight, this massacre that took place on Sunday. It's too painful to think about. And but to hear the president come out and say, well, this is not a matter of gun rights, this is a matter of mental health. Well, I don't necessarily disagree with the issue of mental health, but it's also a matter of having assault types of weapons, a weapon that you can put a 30-bullet magazine in, and run. He went through 15 30-bullet magazines. 15 in a matter of minutes. That's a lot of weaponry.
Well, I think that we have a right to bear arms, but we don't have a right to bear weapons that are meant for combat.
Well, that's the problem. Combat weapons make no sense on the streets. We're not going to defend ourselves from one person with, 17 AR-15s.
But the man who stopped him went and got his rifle.
Right. He probably had a rifle in the back of his pickup like most people here in the state of Oregon have.
Yeah.
And they have a right to that. And I'm proud of them for carrying it. If they need to get that rifle out to go shoot something, there's an animal that's broken a leg. There's a mad dog running after a child. There's something that's happening where they need that rifle. We live in a rural area. And I'm glad they have it, but that is not what the issue is. Handguns and rifles are not the issue. Assault-style weapons and large magazines, those are the issues. If that man had a handgun or a rifle, he could have shot maybe 4 people before he would have been taken down.
Right. And that's probably the direction that they will go. Hopefully, when it comes time for that. When you look at situations like this and you realize that we are in a time of change, and when we're in times of change, these sort of things happen. How does one protect themselves from this? Do you stop going to large venues? How do you? You're
not going to stop going to church.
Well, no,
absolutely
not.
This is the second church shooting. It was a Baptist church, I think, down in Alabama, wasn't it, a few years ago? And it's not acceptable. We need to just start looking at they could start doing metal detectors at churches. They could start having guys who stand at the back door with rifles. But that's not a good statement to say to children going to church.
No, it's not. But if it protects them, it's I think of the children that were killed, the pregnant lady. It was too much. And I know one of the ministers that spoke today said, you can ask the police department to come in and do an assessment to give you ideas as to how to best protect your congregation. It doesn't mean you have to have armed guards at the door, but there are probably things that can be done that will protect from something like this happening. And I think so many of us have been apathetic as to our safety and not paid attention. The old the saying, if you see something, say something, is a good thing. And there are people out there who are unbalanced, who behave strangely. And I'm not saying you if your neighbor is walking around in their underwear, you call in and report them for being out of their mind. But it is something to be more aware of your environment and your surroundings than you have been in the past.
Oh. Well, the other issue, of course, is the issue of mental health, and it's the fact that the president and this entire Congress, or the majority of this Congress, the very first law that he passed was pushed by the NRA, where he gave the right for anyone who'd been educated as mentally insane to have a right to buy a gun. That law is completely insane. The American people don't want that law, and yet it was passed through Congress and signed. That's a law that the NRA wants. We don't want that. I don't want a man who's been educated as insane to have a rifle. That's insane. That is insane.
It is.
Yes. And then he stood there today and said, well, this is a matter of mental health. He passed the law. He signed it. This is not acceptable. And the American people have to stand up and say, no, it's up to us to do that. Our voices can be heard if we get together and stand up and say no.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the process that we are, when you were talking about, what the United States especially was going to be going through in the next 5.5 years, I thought of labor.
Yeah.
And once you are in labor, pain and discomfort kind of rolls in and rolls out. And it feels like in many ways our society, especially in the U.S., is in labor, birthing a new level of consciousness and way of life.
And excellent analogy. We went through that process back in the 1920s when we had the Great Depression, 1928, 29, 32, that whole area in there. We were going through a major transformation. The nation was transforming. We had gone from a nation that was agricultural to a nation that was industrialized. And now we're going from a nation that is industrialized to a nation that is a techno freak. It's completely different, and we're pushing the boundaries now for more of a green universe. And so we're going to move into more things that are aligning ourselves with the sun and the wind and so forth. So we always, when we go through these transformations, we are giving birth. It's a whole new time. And when we do, we have to reevaluate. And yes, there will be those who cling to what they consider the meaning and the original intention of the United States Constitution. But you also have to take into account that did our forefathers have any idea that people would be able to travel around the world in a matter of hours on an airplane?
Yeah, no.
That they could kill people with one rifle. They could kill 150 people. They didn't know those things could ever exist. They didn't. How far ahead could they think? Things they'd never seen before or considered as a possibility. So we have to re-examine and reinvent.
Don't you think, though, that the Constitution has been set up so that if life changes and evolves, we can change and evolve with it?
Yes, I do believe it. I'm saying you have to take the Constitution and read it with an understanding of where we are today. I think it's one of the most amazing documents because it does hold true. Are there things that should be changed? Yes. At the time, it was landowners and white men who had the right to be considered part of the Constitution. There is no reference to women in there. There is certainly no reference that allows us to consider the possibility that people of every single ethnicity have a right to be heard and seen and are part of that Constitution. So there could be a few words that need to be tweaked in there.
Well, now, we've got 5.5 years, so that takes us into 17, 18, 19, 20, 22. Mm-hmm. So after we have passed through this time frame, what can we look forward to?
Well, I think what we're moving into, one of the main things that probably we will start seeing in that time frame will be a change in the way that we are employed or the way that we have income. I think the entire banking system is going to be pulled up by the roots. And because I believe we have to align ourselves with technology as it advances. In 5 years, people driving their own cars will become something more in the rural areas than it is in the cities. We are on the doorstep of vehicles that drive themselves. So if you have technology taking over in every part of every workplace, where is it left that people have an income? And when you see a shrinking of jobs, we have to move into what they call, a universal income as a result of technology. I think they call it UIT. And some countries have already gone to that. So there are changes that will be so different than what you and I were raised on. The Treasury talks about throwing away the penny. We're talking about throwing away the paycheck and taking on a whole new way of looking at our nation. And that would mean that if technology is available to do most of the work, then we come into a place where we have to subsidize the people of the nation, and that's why you go to a universal income. If everyone had a basic income, like I believe Singapore everybody gets like $36,000 a year, and if you want to make more money, you're more than welcome to go out and do whatever it is that you want to do to make more money. But everyone has health care, and everyone should have health care.
Mm-hmm.
To think that it's okay for people who are old and, maybe they worked their whole lives, but they worked at a low-end job and they don't have a pension and they don't have the health care that they need. They have Medicare, but they can't afford the additional insurance it takes. And if I was at a meeting the other day, and one of the women stood up and she said, well, they told me I needed this cream, and the cream was $85,000. And we all just looked at her like, what? Nobody can afford that. Well, sure, Maybe some people can in the 1%, but we're just ordinary people here.
I have friends that have health insurance, but they can't afford to be sick.
Yes, if you're working for a living, you can't afford to be sick in almost every right to work state, because they will fire you if you're gone too long.
Well, not only that, but her deductible is something huge, like $17,000.
Yeah, and so it becomes impossible. And we have to get past that. We have to get past these things. I have a hard time listening to people who are in our Congress who claim to be Christian, who can stand there and say that these are entitlements and that these people don't deserve to be cared for. I have a hard time listening to that.
Well,
I think Christ had that intention at all. He walked among lepers, and most people wouldn't go near a leper.
Well, I think that our Congress needs to really be under the same plan as the rest of us.
Well, they say they try to tell us that they are. I don't know. There's such a debate about that. I have not gone in and dug the information, but
Nice. I highly suspect they are not.
Well, I know this, that once you are a senator or a congressman, that you get a pension for the rest of your life if you only serve one term.
Yeah, that should be changed too.
I mean, that's a great job.
And they voted it for themselves, so maybe we should take.
Part I'm totally opposed to, and I know that is absolutely true. They vote their own raises in. Yeah. I tell you, a corporation would allow such a thing.
Yeah, no, that should definitely be altered. I am sure that. Of course, I'm not sure how you get them to vote for it, but
that's the point. See, this is why there has to be an uprooting of so many of these things. The voice of the people has to become a national voice. We have to break it down and stop having it so separate. It has to be a national voice.
I like the idea that and I'm repeating somebody else's. I heard somebody suggested, and I really liked it, that Congress could propose all the bills they wanted to, but they weren't the ones that got to vote on it. That the whole population would be able to vote. That we could either, do a yay or nay on any bill they proposed, and that way they would have to actually really listen to their constituencies and make sure that what bills they put out there were bills that would, enable people to work and have a better life.
Yeah, that's, there's a lot of issues with what you're saying, and yet that is the direction we are going. Down in, I believe it was Argentina in the recent past, probably in the last year or two, some young people started to realize that their voices were not only not being heard, they didn't know how to make them heard. So they developed an app for their phones where when there was going to be a vote on any issue in their city council or their county commissioners groups, that their app would go off and they would be able to read the bill, and then they would be able to immediately link. They had links in the app that went right to their representative, whether it's their commissioner or their city councilman or whoever it is that represents them, even if it's at a higher level. And they would immediately be able to tell them what they wanted them to do, what their vote would be. And I think that is the beginning of the change that is coming. I think what they're doing there is the beginning. We have to make those kinds of lines incredibly secure so that our vote is very much identified, and we're moving into that. Today, you go by a computer and there is face recognition. It's not just your finger anymore. Now it's your face. And almost all the new telephones that are coming out, I don't think you even call them phones anymore. You call them something else. But nonetheless, these androids that are coming out will have face recognition. And so once you have that, and that is everywhere, people will be able to vote with their face. And then things will become much more secure because you can't really duplicate someone's face. If the voice recognition is as secure as they're saying it's developing, where it actually recognizes your facial movements, not just the way your face looks. And so it really doesn't matter if you gain weight or you lose weight, it will continue to recognize who you are, and no one would be able to duplicate that. So when you get to a point where that happens and we have that available, every person who is of voting age would have the ability to vote from their phone. And so we're moving in this direction where the voice of the people will be heard. But it's going to take a little time, and people have to say, yes, this is what I want. And I think starting at the local level is key for everyone, because once you understand that locally you have so much going on and so much you need to speak to, this gets you involved in government and helps you to understand how things are run. Here in our county, we have a big vote coming tomorrow. We're voting to remove all the county commissioners and set up what they call home rule. It's a home rule charter under the state law of Oregon, where the people who would represent us will come from different parts of the county, and they will be basically volunteers, and we will elect them, but they will be part-time people, and they will be paid more than $500 in a month. They get $250 for each time they go to a meeting, and there won't be more than 2 meetings a month. And that will make a big difference in this county. And they will have term limits. 4 years is what they are given on the outset, and then they can do it once more for 4 years, and then they have to step away, and they can come back another 4 years later to try again. But it's a whole different way of doing business in this county. We've had people who've been being paid $100,000 a year, and they've been controlling everything, taking bribes and doing all this underhanded and corrupt stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how our county votes tomorrow.
Well, it makes sense. For sure.
And, well, you'd think.
And
but
when you stop and think about it, it means that if it...
Are you still there, Barbara? Disappeared on me.
Yes, she did. I wonder where she went.
Oh, you're still there, Deb?
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, one of the things about this experience with the county is, we talk about this fake news at the national level. I was blown away driving down the street and seeing these enormous signs that were put out that said, vote no on home rule. And it said, because of extreme environmentalists, this charter has absolutely nothing to do with the environment. And it's unbelievable. Driving down the street, there are these big signs, fake news. There it is on the streets, propaganda like you can't believe you're looking at. So I wonder how many people are going to fall for that, and if this goes through tomorrow. I have no way of knowing till we see what happens.
Well, I think that so many people have been for so long apathetic. And I mean, when Obamacare was passed, Nancy Pelosi said, we have to pass it so we can read it and find out what's there. Things like that will no longer happen.
Yeah, and things will get simplified too, which is the way it needs to go. I've been saying this, for at least 35 years. We need to have simple legislation. Legislation that goes for 2,000 pages is ridiculous. It's absurd. Yeah. It's insane. 5 pages should be the limit. And we should get to the point, make it clear, no legalese. Let's just know what we're talking about, and let's do it.
That sounds like a plan for sure. And the other thing that
there you go again. She's gone. I don't know where you are. She's coming and going.
She sure is.
Like the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz. She's here and there.
Well, we seem to be fading in and out of the station. I think that education is one of the other places that we're going to see amazing changes over the next decade or so.
It's already happening, right?
Well, I see my 11-year-old granddaughter going through early PSAT tests that she's, focusing on college. And I mean, I think that's good. But my problem is she's being taught for the test. She's not being taught how to think. And
well, this is the discussion I had with my nephew a long time ago. And it relates back to me asking the spiritual beings, if I could do one thing, just one thing, what is the one thing we could do that would change our nation for the better, the world for the better? And what I got was exactly that. And there are words for it, which I did not know that there were, but there are. It's called critical thinking. Mm-hmm. And that is the way our education system was set up back at the beginning of the last century was for an industrialized nation, for manufacturing jobs. And so we set people up, the children came in and they all sat at specific desks and they were going to follow a specific routine and we were going to tell them what to do and they were going to memorize it, and that's what we did. And that does not teach individuals to think. Then back in the 60s, we started to have an influx where Montessori schools started to come into play, and we started to get a certain groups of people who would say children need to be given freedom. We need to treat them holistically. We need to help them to think through issues, not just listen and regurgitate what we tell them. Mm-hmm. And so the groundwork is there. We need to take it to the next step. And so critical thinking is key. I know what I said to my nephew was what we need to do is design some apps that go with your school book. So when you come to the end of the chapter, instead of saying, well, how did, on such and such a date, George Washington crossed the Delaware. And this is what happened, and this is how many English were taken down, and this is how we came to victory. Instead of knowing those facts, it's good to know those facts, but instead the app would give you the position of George Washington, and you would know how many guns you owned and how many people you had and how many cannons and cannonballs, and you would know how wide the Delaware is, and you would know approximately from your scouts how many troops were over there.
And the rationale as to why he planned it for Christmas Eve, and all sorts of stuff.
You would have to make the decision, how will we do this? And that's where you start to handle critical thinking. You try to come to an understanding. Why did George Washington make those choices? Did he make the best choices? Would I have made different choices? And you come to think these things through, and that's what I would like to see. I'd like to see apps for chapters in every single type of learning system in our educational process, so that children already know how to play with an app. Give them the tools to think through that app with the corresponding information that helps them to learn geography or geology or history or social studies or science, whatever it is, mathematics. You can do that. You know, when I did a film years ago, a documentary, which was shown on King Broadcasting up out of Seattle. It was a documentary of what we called at the time a free school down in Davis, California. And there was a woman there. I still remember her name. Marlene Holzclaw was her name. Her husband was the history teacher, professor at University at Davis, University of California, Davis. At any rate, she had started a little independent kind of school for kids who had been kicked out of all the schools in the county, and they were considered delinquents, and they couldn't even find a place to be educated. So she opened a school for the delinquents. And she created a free school, which had the same basis as the Montessori schools, that you treat everyone holistically. The older kids can learn to teach the younger kids. It's an environment with all ages, and you give the children the freedom to express the issues that they're experiencing instead of teaching them to hide them, to bury them, and to be normal with everyone else. And she had, when kids would come in the morning, they would form a big circle, all of them standing. There were no little pothole desks and chairs in her entire place. And she would go around the room and everybody would have their say. And if somebody was angry or upset, she would say, do you want to speak about it? And if they didn't, then she'd say, well, you have a choice. You have the big red chair, and they could kick it, they could tear holes in it, they could jump on it, they could do anything they wanted to it. Or they could go out into the playground with the ball and run around until they got exhausted and then come back. And when they were done with whatever their anxiety was, she would form the circle again and let them speak. That was amazing. We watched these kids do things that these were supposedly delinquents. We saw them compose music. We, in our documentary, we showed them creating computers. We showed the older kids teaching the younger kids. It was a marvelous experience, just marvelous.
And it works. And the other thing, too, that a school, an atmosphere like that allows kids who have a passion for in any direction to follow it and to learn through embracing it and to stretch them into, I mean, I've seen kids, challenge, okay, this is a mousetrap, build a better one. Figure out what will attract the mouse, and then figure out how you're going to create it. And I mean, it's, if you challenge their minds like that, you create individuals that are unstoppable.
I agree with you totally. I would like to see that everywhere throughout our country, no matter what level of society in terms of income children are, because the income is not any way, shape, or form connected to the intelligence of the individual.
Oh, yes,
It has
absolutely.
nothing to do with it. Color, race, none of that has anything to do with the intelligence of the individual. These children, there are so many magnificent beings on this, in this nation,
And
on this planet.
anybody can be successful.
Absolutely. I believe
It's
to the
just
core of my
allowing
soul.
them to experience.
Well, I've said for years it would be nice to have a mentoring program that's available for all children. And through the internet, this is possible. I've said that I would love to see a mentoring program where children could go on and they can say, I want a mentor and I'm interested in doing this. And it could be something as simple as saying, I want to get rid of roaches in my house. And someone could help them, show them how we achieve that goal and how long it might take, how you set that up, set that in motion. And if you have to raise funds for it, how to raise those funds. What do
I
you
hope
do?
I can hear you because I can't.
Oh, no. This is an odd night.
Can you hear Michele, or is she dropping off for you?
No, the only one I hear dropping off is you.
Okay, so I'm the dropout tonight.
Oh, my. At any rate, I see that as very possible.
But you know, when I think of school, when I think of, 2 master's degrees, and then I look at what I have accomplished and what I have done.
Uh-oh.
I need
to hear the rest of that statement.
Oh, I said, I have I have a bachelor's and 2 master's degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And none of that, absolutely none of it, contributed to where I am today.
Well, if I tell you what I think of all of that, when people ask me, what are your degrees? And I have degrees, but I always say, what I witnessed when I was in college is that people can have a degree or get a degree and not know anything.
Absolutely.
Because they are...
I know PhDs that can't tie their shoes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they
Thank
can
God
also,
for Velcro.
They can also pay for their degrees. I needed money in college, and I came from a family that didn't have money. I had scholarship. I had every kind of program you could have, from scholarship to grant to work study. And I did not have enough money to meet the needs I needed to meet in order to have the materials I needed to accomplish what I needed in college. So I had to do other things. And I did people's homework. I did people's papers. I charged a specific amount of money, and I knew I could get an A paper or I could get a B paper. I never had anybody hire me for anything but an A. So, I don't trust paper. I like to hear what the person has to offer. It's who you are. You'll tell me who you are when you speak.
Oh, absolutely. I tell people that all a piece of paper tells you is that you had the money to buy it.
And it might tell you that you really worked hard too. It just, everybody's different, but it doesn't guarantee that you are what you say you are on that piece of paper. Is all I'm saying. Yeah.
And I truly believe that the children of today are brilliant if given a chance.
Yeah, I believe, children to me are the greatest national treasure we have. There is no greater treasure than our children. And to, in any way, shape, or form, shortchange them on their ability to have information available to them and education available to them is to really cut our own roots.
Oh, yeah.
We're chopping our own tree. And
somebody asked a great question in the chat room. They'd like to know what we think about tax breaks for homeschools. I think it's a great idea. If I had a child today, I mean, my baby is 50. But if I had a child today, they would be homeschooled for sure. And I think there should be tax.
I don't see any reason why we don't have tax breaks for homeschool, as long as they're fulfilling whatever the state level curriculum says they are fulfilling. A lot of the time, homeschools go beyond that.
I seem to be gone again.
Yes, you're coming and going an awful lot. Like I said, you're like the good witch in The Wizard of Oz. She's always coming and going too quickly.
Oh, God.
It's hysterical. Put on the ruby slippers and stay with us, would you?
It's a good thing Michele can talk.
Yeah, that's never been a short thing for me. I always have something to say. But that's a great question about homeschooling. We need to have available a lot of different ways for children to be schooled. I knew a group in the Northeast who, in their neighborhood, all these wonderful people, they had so much information, a physicist, a mathematician, an economist, people who spoke different languages. They homeschooled their kids in groups. They went from house to house. And these children, by the time they were in third grade level, they could speak more than one language.
That's so phenomenal. And, I think that people who homeschool continue to learn.
Continue to learn what? Barbara, you don't give us everything we need tonight. Oh, my.
Mackerel. I keep dropping off. I can fold laundry.
I think you have a carbonated phone.
I think you're right. I think there was an EMP, EVP, whatever, blast to my area or something. No, I am totally in favor of homeschooling. And I think it should be an obligation. The parents should homeschool their kids because in many cases, the parents will learn just.
The only problem with that is parents have to make a living and they can't be there for their kids in the society we live in right now. However, when we get to that time, which will be coming, the UIT time, universal income based on technology, there will be so many more options, so much more opportunity. I don't know if I'll live long enough to see it, but I will come back.
I would imagine you will. I keep going and coming back. I keep getting resurrected here. I think my Skype must not like me tonight or something. But I wanted to get back to a little bit about, what's coming for all of us. And I'm wondering, of all of the aspects in anybody's chart, what is the most?
Oh, there she goes again. We really needed the rest of that sentence. It's a little hard for me to comment.
We sure did. That's
I can't comment on what's not there.
And I'm only coming in so that we're here.
What is the most important aspect, or the most important planet, or the most important, I don't know what she's going to say.
Yes, all of it. No, I really would like to know. I mean, everybody basically knows their sun sign, their moon sign, and their rising. They seem to know those three. So which of those aspects?
Well, the most important of those three is your moon sign.
Why?
Because it is the most active. It is affected the most. The moon moves the most rapidly. And the moon represents our emotional nature and what we need. Whereas the sun is simply our ego. It's the key personality. But the moon is all about who we are, and how we go through life is all connected to the moon. What we desire is our moon. And, the United States of America has its moon in Aquarius. So what does America desire? It's a fascinating question. Aquarius is so many things. Aquarius is logic. Aquarius is all of the unique and unusual inventions. It is the sign of the inventor. It's also, according to the ancients, a sign of the healer. So, wow. So what does America want? What does America desire? And when you think about it, America probably has led the world in inventions. And there you
Okay.
go, Moon in Aquarius.
So where somebody's moon in is gives them more information rather than a sun sign or something like that.
In my opinion, yes. I mean, we can talk about sun signs, and moon or sun can be mitigated. So we can't say absolute in anything. I had a lady come to me years ago to one of my astrology classes, and she said, "I think this is all a bunch of bunk. There's nothing to it. I'm a Cancer, and I read all those things about Cancer, and I have nothing to do with them." I says, "Well, your sun may be mitigated." I says, "Let me hear. Tell me more. Tell me when you were born." And so I did her wheel right on the, I did what I call the napkin wheel. I did her wheel on my big white chalkboard, and I said, "Well, your sun falls into the 8th house, and you have sun in Cancer, and Pluto, when you were born, was also in Cancer. So Pluto and your sun are in the 8th house. That is the house of Pluto and Scorpio. So you are probably a whole lot more Scorpio because Pluto will dominate your sun. Sun does not belong in Cancer. It's not exhilarated in Cancer or exalted in Cancer. And to have it in the house of Scorpio will, when it's conjunct Pluto, Pluto will overpower it because Pluto's in rulership in that house. So you're going to be more Scorpio than Cancer." And she says, "Oh my God, what's Scorpio?" And I told her, she said, "That's me. That's me. That is definitely me." I said, "Well, that's what happens. That's why you can't have an astrologer tell you, 'Well, yes, you were born, so that means you're this.' No, you can only know the story to that." Are you still there? I think we lost her again. This is mind-boggling.
I'm never quite sure.
Again, I don't know about this experience. It's so different. Oh my. So anyway, that does explain a little bit why, I've seen people on television shows where they say, "Oh, I bet you can't guess what my sun sign is." And if I was the astrologer, I'd say, "Probably not." But if you tell me more about yourself, I can probably give you a preponderance of what your chart is, because I can always point to the preponderance. And
I keep wondering, people look at their sun sign and they think that's them, and it really isn't.
No, and that's the unfortunate goodwill of George Llewellyn. He was a great astrologer back in the day, and you probably know his publishing house, Llewellyn Publishing. But he's the one who started in the United States the horoscopes. And he did that to try to get people to understand something about astrology. Unfortunately, people took it as entertainment. And of course, it's incredibly limited to even go by someone's sun sign and say, "Oh, well, this is what's going to happen to you this month." So people never really went the next step and realized that there's a lot more to it than that. And I think in some ways it did more damage than good, but it is what it is. People who discover astrology and want to know more about it will find out that it's a very, very valuable tool. We still have complete free will, and astrologers can only paint the pictures based on what's in your chart. But those pictures have a lot of accuracy, and an astrologer can help tremendously if they know what they're doing. So, is Barb with us or not? I feel like I'm doing a monologue.
Well, kind of you were for a moment. She just messaged me and said she can't get in at all. And I still see that Skype is bouncing back and forth.
Wow. So, Deb, ask me something.
Ask you something. I am amazed at some of your comments about the schooling and how it goes. And I really like that idea about the app and the government, so that everybody has a say and would actually get to see what material is being presented. Because the way it is here, so many of us have no clue.
Yeah. And right now we have a Congress that's making sure no one has a clue. I mean, they did the health care bill behind closed doors. They didn't even let the Democrats in. They just took the Republicans in behind closed doors and wrote a bill. And they did the same exact thing with the tax cuts, this tax cut bill, whatever he's calling it.
And my other question is do other people, I mean, does the everyday person, I don't mean, the ones that have got, poli-sci degrees or whatever. I'm saying the everyday person understand this.
Unfortunately, most Americans have to work very hard to make a living, to raise their children. So how much time they have to give to politics or to their community is incredibly limited. So then they're going to end up depending on a news source. And unfortunately, not all news sources are journalists.
You're right.
There are too many news sources today that are propaganda machines. And so there are many people in this country who are not, they think they're getting the news, but they are not getting the truth. They are not getting the news. When I was raised as a journalist, I've been a newscaster in the past. What I was trained to do, or what I believe should always be done, is you give the American people the facts and let them make a decision. And that is what I always did. And I remember years ago, we had a thing that happened in our little town of Wilson, North Carolina, where I lived at the time, and I was a newscaster at the time. And I got a phone call and says, "Oh, they're going to throw the Candy Man out of the city hall." And I says, "What? He's been there since World War II. What are you talking about?" And they says, "Oh yeah, he was found to be doing something illicit, and the county commissioners are throwing him out." I says, "Well, what was he found to be doing illicit?" And they said, No one knows. They're not telling anybody. I says, "Oh man, I'm getting to the bottom of this." And of course, this was becoming this huge scandal that was going out all across the entire state of North Carolina. People were coming in from Charlotte to big news stations were coming in to find out what was going on, because this was, going to be a big emotional pull. And there I was, and I come to find out that he was molesting children, and had been for years. And they didn't want this getting out into the public, but they knew they needed to get him out of the city. Well, the guy was blind. His income was this little candy shop in the city hall, and they were taking his lease away. So everybody was going, "Oh my, county commissioners are horrible people." And I knew them. I knew every one of them. They weren't horrible people. So I thought, I've got to find a way to ask this man and do it in a way that won't hurt children, and yet will get the voice out and just tap this thing down. And I don't remember how I voiced it. I always say a prayer to Michael the Archangel and say, "Help me with this." And I said something to him in a way that a child wouldn't understand, that I was talking about child molestation. I don't remember the words I used, but I put that microphone in front of him and I asked him, "Is it true that you have been known to do this?" And I think I shocked him so much that he just answered yes. And everybody just looked at me, because there were like 30 microphones there, right? And they all looked at me and said, "Can we use that?" And I said, "Go ahead." But my goal was not to destroy our county commissioners, and not to destroy this man either, but to get to the basics of the truth, so the American people, the people in our state at least, and in our county, knew how to make a choice. I didn't want them to get all emotional, which was what they were doing. They were starting campaigns to get rid of the county commissioners, and because this man, how can you throw a blind man out of the city hall? And yet what they were trying to do was defend the city hall so that they weren't going to get sued. So it was a really touchy situation. But as a journalist, when you're a journalist, that's your job, so that people don't go out and fight for something that's not true. Whereas what's going on today is they're coming up with things that give them more points. They get more readership. Even then, that's what they were looking for from across Charlotte. Let's get more readership. Everybody will get up in arms about this. And so they lie and tell stories to get everybody up in arms so they can make more sales with their advertising. More people will be watching. That's horrible. That is so debased and without integrity. It breaks my heart to think that goes on. And how many Americans are living their lives believing what they hear that is propaganda.
You're right. I was starting to think, I think it's been about 30 years since I actually listened, in earnest to the television news, simply because it was all one-sided. It was what they wanted you to hear to get and I felt then it was to get ratings. They were...
Exactly. That's what it's about. That's not what news is supposed to be. And it does break my heart. But, I look at this chart, and when I look at the chart for 2022, and even 2020 as it builds up to 2022, that's what we're doing. We're fighting for the truth. I can see it in the chart. We're going to fight for the truth. We're going to fight. People are going to become more and more aware that they're being lied to. And it's not just somebody at the top telling us it's fake news, because that's not true. He's all about ratings. That's what he understands. We have to get past that. I love our nation more than anything. I love the American people. And I believe in every one of them, no matter what they come at as a decision politically, because we're all fighting for the truth. We all want the same thing for our children, for our families. We all want our nation to stand on its own and to not have huge deficits. And we want the same things when you get down to it. We just are not being fed the truth, and so we can't come to the best conclusion. We're a lot of the time we're making decisions based on fear, and that is not the way we should make a decision.
Well, don't you think though that I'm back again for a while?
The good witch is with us.
God, let me tell you, the more I experience stuff like this, the more I think that perhaps it really is time to move on to a new venue. Nothing like having your plug pulled, so to speak. I think that the American people are capable of so much, and that given the opportunity, in times of stress and times of panic and times of difficulty, they always rise to the occasion. And it feels like we're coming to an...
She's gone.
And I'm gone.
Yes, I agree with you. We are coming to a time where we will come back together. And we will. It will happen.
Oh, of course it will. I just, you get to the point where you get scared, and you kind of lose hope. But I have such great faith in the American people that it's unbelievable. No matter what the issue is, you take things like 9/11, you take things like Las Vegas, and you take those situations and you see the best of humanity stepping up.
Well, we are an amazing people. When our chart was created, and we can give the credit to Benjamin Franklin for creating this chart. He was fully aware of what he was creating when he was doing it. We were born with Venus and Jupiter conjunct in Cancer. Venus, when you put Venus and Jupiter together, they are compassion. And you put them in Cancer, they are nurturing compassion. They are family compassion. They are compassion for children and for family. As a nation, that's part of who we are. We are great people. We are wonderful people.
I want to, while I can say something.
Hurry, you could disappear.
I could. You have no idea. You said Benjamin Franklin created this chart. Was astrology taken into consideration at all at that time frame?
Oh, absolutely. He definitely took it into consideration. This is no hit or miss chart. This chart was built under the fixed star of Betelgeuse.
Oh my God.
Betelgeuse is the
Is
only
there a star
one.
of Betelgeuse?
Oh yes, I'm not joking. I'm a fixed star astrologer as well as a regular Western astrologer. And the fixed star of Betelgeuse is the only one of all the fixed stars in the heavens that does not require anything for success. There are no requirements. If you have Betelgeuse, you will be successful at anything you put yourself towards. You look at this nation. We are amazing success. We were nobody. We were 13 colonies who stood up against the biggest, most powerful nation in the world.
And they didn't think for a minute that we'd make it.
I think they knew we'd make it. Benjamin Franklin knew we had the better chart. The better chart always wins in competition.
Well, I think he knew it, but I think that those that,
England was sure they were going to stomp us down to nothing.
No, absolutely. They didn't think that we would last a year.
Yeah.
And
no, this is an amazing chart. I admire it, and of course, we as astrologers, there have been many rounds about what exact time was this chart born. But if you look on the bill that has Benjamin Franklin on the front and Independence Hall on the back, Franklin left us a clue as to the birth time of the American chart. It's right on the clock tower on the back of your $20 bill. Amazing. He was also an enigmatic man who enjoyed the puzzle. So he left that behind for us. I think Glenda is gone. Are you still with us, Deb?
She's been coming and going, but she's with us again.
Oh, man, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I suppose I could talk for hours, but not sure what to say at this point. Any questions? Anything out there? Anyone want to know anything that I could probably answer?
Well, I'm
Deb?
sure you can answer an awful lot.
Wait. I hear Glenda appearing with her bubble.
She says she's here in spirit.
there's no guarantee how long this is going to last.
Oh my goodness, this is unbelievable. This is truly a unique night.
It's really, it's funny because, remember
Oh no! She starts a sentence and I'm expecting more.
Yeah.
No, I'm still here, aren't I?
Well, you are now.
You are now, but you weren't.
You said remember, and we didn't get anything after remember.
I don't believe it.
So what is it that we should be able to remember? Remember when you...
Have no idea. It's gone. I mean, I have a feeling. You know how the moon is void of course. Well, I think that my station is void of course at this particular moment. And to me, void of course means there's nothing there.
Well, that is what void of course does mean. It means that in the case of the moon void of course, it means that the moon has passed all Ptolemaic aspects to other planets and therefore is making no contact.
Or Nibiru may be coming in here and interfering with the signals and stuff. I feel that things like this signal change, signal new opportunities, and I am so excited to think that all of the people in the United States have this opportunity now. It's a time where they can let go of everything that has been weighting them down, and they can look at some of their passions and incorporate them into into their realities. It's a time when there is excitement. I mean, this is a time of great excitement. I know a lot of people are panicked, but I think it's a wonderful time.
Well, we all have the opportunity to see the glass half empty or half full.
Mm-hmm.
And choose half full, because it's definitely a better choice.
Yeah. Well, I think tonight I have a dribble cup.
You have a hole in the bottom of it.
Unbelievable.
This has been a fascinating experience in the thousands of shows I've done in my life. Never one like this before. So you're right. There are new experiences right around the corner.
Darn straight there are. No, happily, you have no problem talking, nor does Deb, so that, when I drop off the face of the earth for a while, I'm fully confident that the show will go on.
We'll do our best to carry on.
I've been sitting here doing, Candy Crush while I've been twirling and off.
Have you really? I have never done Candy Crush, but my nephews told me about it years ago, and it was when I first got my tablet. So I thought I was ordering Candy Crush, and what I ended up with was a cheat sheet for Candy Crush, and I never did get the program.
Oh, my goodness. I do Candy Crush Jelly, and the only thing you have to be careful of is, every now and then you can buy stuff so that you can cheat, and you shouldn't do that. But it is something that keeps your mind occupied, and it's another one of those ways of keeping your brain going. So, but Candy Crush is free, and I play with it when there's boredom setting in, because I want you all to know that I have said some absolutely brilliant things tonight, which obviously
which we weren't able to hear.
I have been at the top of my game. I have been totally, absolutely, inspiringly, just so creative that
you're a bit over the top at this point, I think. We're not buying it all, but we love you anyway.
I gotta tell you, I mean, I think it's something that happens to everybody, and I think you either laugh about it or you cry, and I will choose to laugh.
I think that's wise.
I mean, at least Deb was not stuck with somebody that I had, the guest from hell a long time ago, and I hadn't really spoken to them before we did the interview, and I realized within the first 10 minutes that they only had three things that they said, no, yes.
Oh my God.
and I started to sweat right away, and I must have dropped 5 pounds just in sweat in the 2-hour time frame, because they were not going to talk to me. I would ask a question and they would say, yeah.
My Lord.
So ergo, I decided that if a person couldn't talk with me and be spontaneous, then I wasn't doing a show, no matter how damn brilliant they were. And there have been a couple that were just brilliant.
Yeah, there is a real gift to being able to express. You could be brilliant and your brain really calculates well, but when it comes to touching the public with what you know, some people just don't have the gift to do that. And so, we're really fortunate, those of us who do, really fortunate.
I didn't hear what you said, but I'm sure it was brilliant too.
Oh my Lord, she goes and comes too much.
Just proof that this is a live show.
I'm going to have to listen to the archive just to hear what you said.
Too far gone now.
Yeah. Well, no, it's. I think that spontaneity is just one of the most wonderful things that you can have, and the ability to just kind of soldier on no matter what is inspiring. And I think that um, if our country and the people in it during this time of shift and change can just go with the flow and laugh about it when it becomes unsettling, that we can conquer the world. Not that we want to,
Yeah.
but
I think if I could say anything to the American people, I would say, please put aside your political differences and just recognize that the person that is there wearing some different political outfit is an American who wants exactly the same things you want.
Mm-hmm.
They want the same things, and we need to put these differences aside so we can find common ground, so we can solve the problems we're facing. We have the ability when we get together to solve issues and find ground that will do the right thing. Just we have to get away from this idea of mob consciousness, which is being promoted from a hierarchy now, and that's not who we are. That Venus and Jupiter conjunct tells me who we are. We are a loving people. We are a compassionate people. We will take care of the children. We want to take care of the elderly. We don't want to be a people who just discards human life. That's not us. We have to remember who we are.
Well, if I had my druthers, I'd do away with political parties.
Well, they will go. I have said that by about 2086, I think we will be past the political parties. I'm hoping it'll be sooner. I hope it'll be in the 2030s that it really happens, but I'm pretty darn sure they'll be gone by 2086. And if you have face recognition on phones and every individual can vote, then we don't need political parties. We don't need them anymore. We never needed them. Some of our founding fathers were completely opposed to any such thing as a political party, because by having two opposing parties, you have control issues instead of having the voice of the American people being heard. Time and again, we've seen that when the majority voice is heard, it is always the correct choice. It's always the correct choice.
Well, no, I agree with you. And I'm just not sure, political parties carry so much power these days.
Well, that's the only way they're going to go is with a major transformation, which is what we're doing. That's what we're in. So, this, as much as this eclipse portends all kinds of things, I think it's also something that will unbalance and rebalance the nation, and with it will come a new clarity. And that new clarity, if we can speak our voice directly through the new technologies that are being worked through at this time, we won't need those parties, because any individual then can say, I want. And I've said this years ago, we should be electing people through a positioning. Start in the county. The county says we have no one. This county says we have someone. That county says we have someone. And the state says, okay, these are the people we have for the state of Oregon. Oregonians, who do you want to represent our state? Pick him or her. And then that person goes into the group for the nation. And maybe some states won't have anybody at all. How often will Wyoming have somebody? Or North Dakota? So,
Michele, thank you so much for being here. Wish I could have been here all the time, but
me too.
Good night, everybody.